Good morning, everyone, or whatever time of day it is when you're tuned in here. Um, I normally start these things and just sort of ramble, I guess, for a couple of minutes because it can take even people who have said, "Yeah, I want to tune in." It can take people a little bit of time to join in, and I realize that this is super early for some people, depending on what time zone you're in. I'm in the Eastern time zone. It's 7:30 in the morning for me here, and um, folks in the West Coast, it'd be 4:30 in the morning for them. So my apologies. I'll try to do these at different times, but this is the time that works. I get super busy um, fairly early on in the morning. So anyway, I hope that we'll get some folks joining in this morning and even commenting. I find if I put the word sex in the title, it's not just to be sensational, but sometimes that can attract people. And there's not going to be any like graphic conversations here, or I don't think or anything along those lines. So anyway, the topic this morning, I'm going to talk about sex, shamanism, and mysticism specifically. Um, I want to talk about the separation, in my opinion, the artificial separation between sex and spirituality, and how historically that hasn't really been a thing, and that many spiritual systems have recognized the power of sexual energy, the power of sex to bond people, but also to enlighten, which is where the mysticism angle comes along. And my cat might make an appearance. You want to come and say hi, Phoebes? This is Phoebe. Oh, she's not. She's like, I'm a little camera shy this morning. This is Phoebe. This is Phoebe. She's yeah, she likes to walk over my keyboard when I do these things. So hopefully we won't. If I get cut off, oh, she's gonna use me as furniture now. Uh, Good thing she's adorable, right? You can't get angry with her. She's too cute. She walks in front of over my keyboard and stuff. So my background, if you don't, if you're not familiar with me, and by the way, you can chat. As far as I know, at least YouTube chat will come up here, and if you have questions or comments or whatever, and I'll sometimes share them on the screen. So feel free to jump in, ask questions, or make comments or whatever. So I talk a lot about sexuality and spirituality, and sort of the intersection of those things. Very interesting. I'm not going to give a rundown of it because I haven't gotten too far in it, but I'm currently reading this book called The Secret History of Western Sexual Mysticism, which talks about sexual rites that were done part of the Greek mysteries, also part of very early Christian practices. There were lots of sexual practices that were part of early Christian practices that were part of what were considered heretical, later on considered heretical sects of Christianity. So I'm just getting into that now. It's fascinating stuff to me. And we have a lot of writings from people who were oppressing the Gnostics and whoever, saying, "Look at how bad these people are. They're doing these." The cat. They're doing these rituals that involve sex. How horrible! How offensive! How we need to wipe them out. Violence being, of course, better than what they call agape love. Agape. There were orgies. There were orgies in early Christian, in some early Christian sects. Not all of them, and of course you have celibacy and all that sort of thing. But I do think it's interesting that one of the first written descriptions of the female orgasm that we have in Western literature is from a nun, I believe Hildegard of Bingen was a nun who was locked away, a mystic. Okay, she wrote about achieving, at least viewing the Godhead, and described it, and it was pretty cool stuff. But Anne wrote lots of music and did all kinds of amazing things. Hildegard von Bingen, and you can find her stuff. And I think I could be incorrect here, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I think that she was one of the first people to actually describe the female orgasm which is interesting because she would have been celibate. That isn't to say that celibate people can't masturbate or whatever. However, it happened that she did a deep dive exploration. So I'm going to talk this morning. I'm going to talk about the word. I'm going to talk about ecstasy, about the word ecstasy, not the drug ecstasy. I'm going to talk about ecstasy and kind of what that means. And in English, very frequently we associate that with, I'm in ecstasy. I'm having, sexual ecstasy. And that is, that's perfectly valid. But I'm going to talk about religious ecstasy as well, and how in many practices those things are brought together to empower the practice. So I'm going to bring that topic up. So let's talk about ecstasy a little bit. Let's talk about what the word means, where it comes from. It comes from the Greek ekstasis, I think Greek, maybe Latin, ekstasis. I think originally from Greek and then maybe into Latin and then to English, but doesn't really matter. What it means, what ekstasis means, is to literally to stand outside, right? That might come off strange, but ekstasis means to stand outside of yourself, to separate from your normal consciousness, from your body. This is what shamans do on an everyday basis, whether they're using substances like ayahuasca, or they're using drumming or dancing or whatever means they do that. One of the seminal texts on shamanism is by Mircea Eliade, and is called Shamanism, Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy. And he's not talking about sexual ecstasy. He's talking about generating a state of ecstasis. There's also this idea, this concept, again, a Greek word of gnosis, Gnosis, and you may have heard of the Gnostics, Gnostics. They were, Gnostics is an umbrella term for a number of competing early Christian churches, predominantly in Europe. There were a lot of them in the area of France. The Cathars are one, but there are many more than that. So the Gnostics are called so because of a belief in personal elevation. They tended to be more mystical. They were, and I'll talk about what mysticism is, but they thought that they could surpass this world, right? They individually, they didn't have to go to a priest to access God, that they thought they could elevate their consciousness. And gnosis, the word that it comes from in Greek, means wisdom. It's one word for wisdom. There are other words for wisdom, just like we have like, hey, he's smart, hey, he's intelligent, hey, he's wise, right? Gnosis was a personal. It's the Western equivalent of what we call enlightenment or nirvana. Right, it's a merger with the Holy Spirit, and the way to get there in some sects was through ecstasis, through ecstasy, through trance, altered state. One way to do that was through sex practices, whether that be, there were Gnostic sects that, according to writings, had orgies. It's important to remember that a lot of this stuff was really blended. Early Christianity, the first couple hundred years of Christianity, there was a lot of blending with pagan, old pagan rites, old pagan beliefs. And of course, the Greeks, we might think of orgies as just wild sex parties, but they were part of the spiritual life. They were in celebration of certain gods, like Dionysus, for example, or Bacchus in Rome. So these were these wild orgies, these feasts that were followed by large group sex rituals, I guess, were ritualistic, and they were part. Not to say that I don't know if people had them just for the sake of getting a bunch of people together and having sex together, but they were definitely a part of religious observations, and they were a part of the mystery schools. And this might be a term you've heard. Um, the particularly the Greek mysteries, but there are lots of mystery schools. There were Egyptian mystery schools and Greek and Roman, but the Greeks were known for their mystery schools because they lasted for thousands of years, right? So the mysteries at Eleusis were around for over 1,000 years. Tens of thousands of people from all walks of life went every single year. There was it was a it was an initiatory process. It involved drinking psychedelic substances, a beer known as kaikon, which was infested with ergot, the fungus that they make LSD out of. So they were definitely having ecstasis, standing outside oneself. So we don't know a whole lot. Like we couldn't break down the entire thing, but there are some writings about. There's some research from contemporary people to know about what happened at these mystery schools. So they would drink this substance, this psychoactive substance. There would be a play or a dramatization. So this is pretty common, even like when you see Christianity and they do, the passion plays, or they act out the, they go do the 12 stations of the cross, or I think the passion plays are probably a better example, where people get to experience being, in real time and movement with people acting out the parts of their religious stories, right? So these happened in the mystery schools, at least the one at Eleusis in Greece, right? So you would take psychoactive substances, you'd be in a temple, I guess, that would be darkened, lit by torchlight. And then you would have people acting out the myths of their gods and goddesses. And you would kind of get swept up in that. And then there were sexual rites that were a part of that. I don't know, like, in what order those things were done. But we know that was a part of it. It was a part of ritual life. So then, what happened when Christianity kind of took over in the early first few centuries, but particularly when after Constantine made Christianity the official religion of Rome, is that there were a lot of stamping out of competing belief systems, and a lot of church fathers looked at anything that smacked of paganism as regressive, bad, pulling people away from the new church. It's amazing to describe Christianity as the new church, but at that time it was. And so there are a lot of church fathers writing about, in very scathing ways, about these heretical systems of Christianity that still had a great deal of pagan belief, pagan practice wrapped up in them. Very common, if people may have the false idea that, after Jesus died on the cross, Christianity was put in place, and it was this one thing until the Protestant Reformation happened, 1500 years later. And that's not the case. There were lots of competing systems, but Rome is very powerful, and the Roman form of the Christian Church wiped out, literally committed genocide to wipe out other competing churches. You can look at the Albigensian Crusade, which was when they talk about the Crusades, you think about people going to Jerusalem to fight off the Muslims that had taken over, to bring Jerusalem, the Holy Land, back to Christianity. But prior to that, we actually had the first crusade, the Albigensian Crusade, in which the Roman Church killed something like 1/3 to 1/2 of the population of southern France, who were Christian, but following, they were Cathars, they were, other form of Gnostic sects. So a lot of that stuff died out and was repressed because it was too pagan, whatever. And then, of course, many forms, what we call paganism, the Greek paganism and Celtic paganism and Roman paganism and all this stuff, Egyptian paganism. A lot of that was associated with fertility, right? Fertility was critical for these cultures to survive. The Egyptians relied on the Nile flooding and receding every year, right? So there was a lot of ritual around that, around the Nile, around the rains that brought the flooding, that deposited the fertile soil and then would recede so they could plant the crops and store grain and make beer and make bread and all of the things that the Egyptians did. So there was a lot of with many, most, maybe all, I don't know, pagan cultures, there was a great deal of focus on fertility. It was really important, and there were fertility rituals practiced. So ritual sex acts practiced all over the world, right? Sexuality and spirituality were not really separated out until, well into, there were pockets of it, right? There were places where you have orders that are celibate and that sort of thing. But the idea that that our ideas about sexuality are very new in the scope of human history. The ideas of human sexuality and spirit are new, ish. When we're talking 1,500 years or even 2,000 years or 1,800 years, however long, that's a drop in the bucket of what I would say human history, but not, that includes prehistory. That includes the, million years or so that I don't know what the timeline is for modern humans at this point. It keeps being pushed back. But we'll say, 1 million years is a long time for humans to be on this planet. But in the scope of things, not that long. But, 1,000 or a couple thousand years is a drop in the bucket of what humans have gone through, have done, continue to do. So let's talk about sex and shamanism. And there's so my background is in my major background is in shamanism. I teach and practice shamanism. And in shamanism is a blanket term for common spiritual practices, meaning that there are some core pieces of shamanism that exist cross-culturally, so throughout many cultures around the world, even cultures that haven't had contact any time that we can think of. it's ancient. We have perhaps evidence of shamanic practice in cave paintings that are 50,000, 30,000 years old. There's I'm not an anthropologist or archaeologist, but there was some carved bone found in a cave in Israel that was dated to 300,000 years ago that some say proves a shamanic practice there. I think that would predate anatomically modern humans. So perhaps shamanic practice predates modern anatomically modern humans. In which case, it would be very, very old, right? We know, for example, that Neanderthals, we're learning much more. We used to think of them as brutish and dumb and that sort of thing. We know that they buried their dead with grave goods, meaning they had some concept of spirituality. They had some concept of soul or afterlife where they would care for the dead. Where if it was just animalistic survival, they might do something with a dead body, but they wouldn't probably bury it very carefully with grave goods. They wouldn't put time and energy and things that were necessary into graves with their dead, but they did. And so we know that that we can extend that to say there must have been some belief in an afterlife or soul or some form of spirituality among Neanderthals. So and we see in cave paintings, we see therianthropes, half animal, half humans. We see pictures that they have described as shamans. We have seen geometric patterns that represent what is sometimes seen in shamanic trance. And so that has been said that people have been practicing shamanism forever. So shamanism is this really broad term, and it's always viewed through a cultural lens, right? So shamans in Asia, for example, Nepali shamans or shamans in Mongolia, Siberia, or cats. Here's Phoebe. Hi, Phoebe. Phoebe, you want to say hi? Come say hi. Look how cute this cat is. Look at that face. All right. Sorry. Disturbed you. I don't know what you're... So shamans in Asia will, and amongst themselves, among different cultures, will have look at things through a different lens than shamans in, say, Northern Europe. So there are still shamanic cultures, the Sami in the area of northern Scandinavia, far north Scandinavia, above the Arctic Circle, usually, is still a shamanic culture, right? And that will be very different. They'll have some commonalities that we can say this is shamanic. They use drums the same way they do in Asia. They'll have some commonalities, but they'll have some differences, and they will be through a cultural lens. They will have different gods and goddesses that they work with, and some different ceremonies and obviously different words for things and stuff. But shamanism predates, in my opinion, any existing language, any existing culture currently, although that may not exactly be true. Like there's evidence of shamanic cave painting among the Aboriginal people, the indigenous people of Australia, as far as I know, practice a form of shamanism, and they've been around for something like 70,000 years, continuous culture. So that would be probably the one exception I can think of, unless there are, really remote tribes that haven't changed. And I guess that can be the case. There are islands and places in rainforests and stuff where there are very few tribal cultures have not been contacted by non-tribal Western culture stuff. And I remember there's an island, I think I'm gonna it's not that important, but there was an island with a tribe that has not had contact with folks outside of that island, as far as we know, ever. And there was some missionary that decided he was going to, it was prohibited. It's protected by the government. I think it's India. And some missionary decided to go out there and try to convert this tribe to Christianity or something. And they shot arrows at him and killed him and buried his body on the beach. And they're like, yeah, we're not, I don't know what ever happened to that person. Like if they can't really go get him because they're not, they don't want to perhaps spread disease to the island, or, what happens if these people who, have been living their lives for time immemorial decide to attack you because you're an outsider. Do you defend, do you shoot them? What do you do? I don't know. So I don't know how that ever resolved, other than this person who I think was pretty misguided. I get it. I get that some people are taught that they have to, it's their duty to spread their religious beliefs amongst others, but it was very tragic outcome for him. Sorry, it looks like I'm doing something strange. I'm patting my cat, who, if I don't, will walk all over my keyboard. See hi, Phoebes. Hello. I'm not doing anything weird, I promise, or strange or untoward or anything that will violate the terms of use of any of the platforms this is on at the moment. So anyway, talking about shamanism being a global thing, and the main characteristic of shamanism is ecstasy, meaning entering into altered state, entering into a state where you are ecstasis, standing outside of yourself. Shamans enter into an altered state. They travel in non-ordinary reality. You could call the spirit world, the astral plane, whatever label you want to slap on it. And then they work with helping spirits. Those three components are present in anywhere there is shamanism being practiced. And it's hello, Phoebe. And it's so common, like it was such an important part of just being human, being that we find shamans in cultures all over the world. Everywhere there were humans, we find them in certainly in Europe amongst the Celts. We find them in and amongst the Norse. There was shamanic practice in indigenous cultures everywhere. Have, and not every, I won't say that every indigenous culture is shamanic, because that is not true. But at one point in time, perhaps. So shamanic practice exists everywhere, but it's also always viewed through a cultural lens. It makes it difficult for anthropologists sometimes to study shamanism, because they'll have to go, is this shamanism? Is this shamanism? I mean, this person is fulfilling the role of a shaman, but they're not doing that right now. They're not doing the thing that we call shamanism right now. So it can be challenging. There's a lot of intellectual conversation about the definition of shamanism amongst academics. That's mine. Shamanism is an ancient spiritual practice practiced by, as far as we know, just about every culture at some point in its history. And it involves ecstasis, an altered state of consciousness, working with helping spirits, and travel outside of the body, travel in what we call non-ordinary reality, some concept. So the words that are used for that, those terminology, obviously, again, are culturally dependent, right? So the indigenous people of Australia might talk about dream time, or the Celts will talk about the other world, right? The Celtic other world, where the fairies live and whatever. What I find more and more that when I learn about these things is that they're talking about very they're talking about the same things using different vocabulary and looking through the lens of their culture. Question: is it common for shamans to work with portals and also helping spirits cross over? Yes, both of those things. So it depends on what you mean by portal. So if one of the things that I do, that's a little bit of a specialty of mine, is house and space clearing. And sometimes somebody or something or some event or even geological stuff under a space will create kind of a rift that allows stuff to come through that you don't necessarily want to, and can cause problems in a space. And so I've done work in that regard with portals. As far as helping spirits cross over, yeah, that's a huge part of shamanic practice. The word for that is another Greek word, is psychopomp. So psychopomp means guide of souls or guide of spirits, and helping spirits cross over, helping people who are in the process of dying, or or who have died and gotten stuck, is a big part of shamanic practice. And I say big, I mean, it depends. Shamanism is a very broad topic that covers a significant amount of practices. There's everything. There's weather shamanism. There's death and dying work, helping psychopomp death and dying work. And Kat is very interested in this talk today. There is shamanic healing, very, very common. There is depossession work, curse unraveling. There's all kinds of stuff that's can be very sort of tactical, right? Meaning, how do I help out? The role of the shaman is to help people, not just as a spiritual functionary, but to help people heal physically. And so in many cultures, shamans will also be herbalists, or they'll be, they take the place of doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists and counselors and all of these things in cultures that didn't have those things. But yeah, very, very common. Both of those things are very common. Unless you had another idea about what you meant by portals, I'm happy to, if you have a follow-up question, I'm very happy to answer that as well. And I welcome chat and questions here. So, can I elaborate a bit on weather shamanism? Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you for coming on. I love talking to folks, and I love having some dialogue. I'll talk a little bit about weather shamanism because it's not a specialty of mine in particular. But interestingly, my teacher practices weather shamanism, and it's in my practice, the way that I was taught. I don't work with weather a whole lot. In the way that I was taught, it's not about trying to change the weather, although there are certainly cultures where they would say try to bring rain if they needed rain for crops, or try to affect negative weather patterns. Weather shamanism, cool. Apparently people are into weather shamanism this morning. I wish I knew more about it. I would tell you much more about it. But so in my practice, one can actually do healing with the elements of weather. One gets weather helping spirits, where they can communicate with different weather patterns, and everything, like in the animistic view that shamanism comes from, everything is a spirit, right? So rain is a spirit. Clouds are spirits. They just happen to have a physical representation as well. For portals, because I happen to see often, open them when helping me sometimes. I found it interesting. Yes, so that's another. yeah, your helping spirits can open portals if they want you to go somewhere or they want something to come to you. That can be that's something, or they can come through a portal. So there's that as well. I thank you for clarifying. I can speak a little bit more about that. There are also ways to journey through portals to get to specific places, and I'm thinking the place where I use a portal more than any other would be certain types of death and dying work. Like for me to cross over to the afterlife, and I don't do a whole lot of this, but it's something that was part of my education, to cross over to the afterlife to communicate with somebody's deceased loved one or something. I would normally use a portal for that, but I've traveled through portals for other reasons as well. So, oh, good. Um, yeah, yeah. So, interestingly, when I was studying, yeah. So, that can absolutely, that is absolutely the case. Can happen. Um, so when I and it just as we are talking about weather, literally just started snowing in my backyard. Well, it's snowing not just in my backyard, but I'm looking out into my backyard, and it's snowing, and a large bird just flew through. So anyway, I guess we're supposed to, even though we're talking about sex and shamanism and mysticism, we're talk a little bit about weather and weather shamanism. So um, my first foray into shamanism, like the first thing I did to learn some things shamanism, was to jump into an apprenticeship, which is really weird. Not necessarily weird from an outside perspective. That's in most places. That's how you learn. And I don't come from a tribal culture. I'm not indigenous. So jumping into an apprenticeship is, some people will like watch a bunch of videos, read some books, take some classes. I was like, no, I feel the calling. I'm going to jump into apprenticeship. My teacher, even though I had no training, accepted me into an apprenticeship after meeting with me. We met for like 3 hours, and she's like, okay, you have to do X, Y, and Z before you start. And I did. Oh, hello. Um, uh, I welcome everyone and every spirit who is here to, in their compassionate form. Um, it's interesting working with different spirits. Some spirits are very let's say large spirits. Complex is probably a better word, like deities, right? Working with gods and goddesses. um, Gods and goddesses are such complex spirits, like we can't really grasp them fully, or even like a tiny sliver of what they actually are. So we see them anthropomorphized or coming into um, little statues, or whatever. When we work with deities, and I'll go back to I'm a big on tangents today. Maybe a little more coffee will help me out. When we work with deities in particular, or other complex spirits, angels, that sort of thing, we are working with an aspect of them, also known as an avatar, a representation of them, because they are formless. If you see a deity, you're seeing a form that it is coming through to you in, for maybe understanding, or to cause an effect. There are invocations to spirits, from ancient grimoires and stuff, that are like, implore the spirit to show up in a form that's not going to scare the pants off you. Now, that might seem funny in today's world, where we have, like, horror movies have gotten, I can't even watch horror movies anymore. Like, they've gotten so intense, um, that I don't really watch them anymore. But anyway, um, so yeah, so I learned, so in my apprenticeship, my teacher said, we're gonna study weather shamanism. And so there's a group of us studying weather shamanism briefly. And she said, I want you all to journey and ask if it's okay to change the weather, right? Like if a hurricane's coming to hit you, is it okay to try to push it away, or, do something with helping spirits to try to affect the weather? Every single person got a resounding no. Don't mess with the weather. Don't change the weather. Don't adjust the weather. Why? Because weather is a chaotic system. And even if you could, push a hurricane off its path, who knows what effect that would have, right? You might think you're doing good. Oh, hurricane is headed for this populated area. But maybe by moving it or something, you cause 3 times as much destruction or something along those lines. So, got a very clear message not to mess with the weather. And trust me, if it was otherwise, I always listen to my helping spirits. They know more than I do. If it was otherwise, I would certainly have better weather for a lot of things. But told not to mess with it. But I do healing work with weather spirits. Sometimes, occasionally. That's done for me anyway. That's done in person. I don't work with, I work with people over the world, so I don't see people in person. I see people over Zoom. There are some healing ceremonies I can't do over Zoom, very few. And the majority of people, when they come to me, I can do it, whatever my helping spirits need me to do for them. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So your dragon likes the rain. um, yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And oh, you're in Key West. Lucky you. Um, yeah. I mean, you can reach out to me. You can come through my website. It's just meandshaman.com. So I have plans for things outside of, I'm getting to the point where um, one-on-one teachings I will always do. I will always teach people. I will always have mentees, as far as I know, as far as my plans go, because I love that so much. I love teaching people one-on-one. I love teaching classes. Physical classes are so much fun, but so much work, like having to line up a space, get the, do all the contracts, advertise the classes, make sure you have enough people registering for the classes so that you can pay for the space. All of the communication that happens. I have a great deal of respect for my teacher who taught through classes for, a couple of decades at least. And I'm like, this is so much work. She's like, yeah, it is. But she also always had an assistant, as long as I know, as well. But even then, it's a tremendous amount of work. So I'm trying to figure out some other ways as well. Doing some, either like some membership programs where we could do like an online apprenticeship for people who are attracted to that and still have a cohort. So one-on-one teaching is fantastic. If you can do it, if you can find somebody that you really resonate with, that's really important. Fit is incredibly important. Find a teacher you fit with. And you get one-on-one attention. The program can be very flexible. So I've got students who are, I'm really interested in healing work. Okay, we'll focus on that. Or I'm really interested in ancestral work and death and dying work. Okay, we'll focus on that. Along the way, you're going to get everything else. But, with one-on-one mentorship, you can really place your focus wherever whatever your interest is. I mean, there are basics you have to learn that everybody has to have, but besides that, the focus can be whatever. And I have people who jump around like, oh, I really want to learn about this. And they're like, no, I want to go back and learn about this. I have a student right now who is like, I really want to learn about omens and dream work. Well, very cool, because those are specialties of mine. And then if somebody came to me and said, I really want to learn weather shamanism, I would probably refer them to somebody else, because I just don't know enough about it. And I don't want to teach. I I don't want to try to teach somebody something that I'm not very confident in that I'm delivering good stuff. Yeah, weekly journey circles. Oh my gosh, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And thank you. I mean, that's a big compliment, and I want to, as in a healthy way, I want to try to own genuine compliments. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate that, and I do my best in having ethics, and I think that's what you mean by impeccability. I hope having ethics is incredibly important for me. It's why I don't do things like teach stuff I don't know, or do healing ceremonies that I'm not qualified to do, or that kind of thing. And I've been studying shamanism for um, 10 years now, studying and practicing shamanism for 10 years done. And I will never be done with it. I will never be done learning. And I love to share. So, yeah, I was actually thinking about, I don't know if I could do journey circles weekly, but uh, I might open them up if there was enough interest, and biweekly or monthly or something to start. And if there was, if there was serious interest in that, I'll have to check out Eventbrite. I've used Eventbrite um, for people registering for physical classes, but I haven't used it for something virtual. But I do have. There are ways that I can. There are some ways that I can do this. I have a virtual classroom set up on Teachable, and I also have YouTube subscriptions and stuff like that. But so, thank you for putting the idea probably back in my head. I'm sure that I had that idea at some point, but yeah, I would love to do some journey circles with people virtually. Such a great way to connect. And if you've any experience with journeying, or if you haven't experienced journeying before, um, it's a profound skill that you can learn. I think anybody can learn. I think I am fully, this is not a brag, but I think I can teach anybody to journey. Um, and one of the reasons for that is I've had people come to me who are aphantasic, can't make pictures in their head. I've had people come to me who just were struggling with it. And I worked with other teachers and borrowed ideas and tried things out in classes with people who are struggling to journey and that sort of thing. And I've come up with a way of teaching journeying with other people, not just me, uh, but with some other people, came up with a way of teaching journeying that's been really successful. But yeah, I mean, I would definitely like to do journey circles. One of the thing is, if you have a journey circle, you really only want people with journey experience there, unless it's a teaching circle. So it'd have to like make that very clear as well. Like, you have to know how to journey, because we can't take time to walk people through how to do that in a circle. But yeah, I'm definitely open for it. I will check out Eventbrite for doing that, or one of my other platforms. One of my problems is I have too many platforms. I'm like, where did I put that? Oh, that's on YouTube, or that's on um, that's on Facebook, or that's on Instagram. Or one of my students, I haven't checked out her stuff yet, but has recently, I can't tell you who it is because I don't talk about who my students are, or whatever. But one of my students recently went really viral on TikTok, and I was like, TikTok? I don't know much about. I do have a TikTok account, but it was mostly to check up on what my kids were doing. But yeah, she's gone super viral on TikTok, and so I need to check that out as well. I don't know that that would be a great like live teaching platform, but I will check out Eventbrite for sure. And if I do something along those lines, I will definitely announce it to, make an announcement, publish it on YouTube and on my page and social media and stuff like that, and have people sign up. But if you've never journeyed as part of a group before, even virtually, distance, what you learn in journeying is that time and distance don't matter that much. They break down anyway. Their time and space are intimately linked to mass. That, we know that from Einstein, right? And in the spiritual world, there's no mass, there's no matter. Everything is formless, even though we're perceiving it as forms in our consciousness. Everything is formless. So time is really loosey goosey in there. So even if you're watching a recording of a journey circle and you journey along with people, you'll get this current of energy that gets created. There's a real synergy that happened. And I'm going to tell a story. It's going to sound a little bit like a brag. It's not. This is a good question. You mentioned only having people who know how to journey. How do I know? How do I know if I know how? So that's a really good question. I would say if you have learned how to journey somehow, whether that is through some online class or learned through a book or something, not necessarily ideal, but you would have to be able to journey to drum music, and at least who one of your helping spirits is that you met through journeying. If you have those things, that would be sort of the basic qualification. I would say you should have probably visited the lower world and the upper world in your practice at some point, but not 100% necessary. As long as you've gone somewhere to one or both of those places. So that's a very good question. How do I know if I know? How do I know if I'm doing it right? I don't always know if I'm doing it right. I can only one thing about shamanic practice, and this is very, very common. I've seen this with my students. I've seen this with people in my teaching cohort and stuff. Is in journey, it's like, how do I know if I'm not just making this stuff up? And the truth is, it's hard to know until you get information, like you get absolutely solid confirmation of information that you didn't know beforehand. So, I've gotten, like, I'm not particularly psychic, I'm not particularly clairvoyant or anything like that. And in journey, I have gotten such accurate information that there is no way for me to know, like, not even the person I was journeying for had the information at the time. I was like, oh, I had people send me pictures of things that I saw in journey like 3 months later when they encountered them. Hey, check this out. This is exactly what you described in your journey. And it was a picture of something that in their life. And I was like, kind of blown away by that. And then you get a little bit of faith about it and trust in your helping spirits. Learn by accident. Yeah, that can happen as well. Some people are natural born shamans. They just are. Your guide was like, hey, guess what? You're a shaman. And, yeah. You have you have a very impatient helping spirit, and mine are like that as well. I actually, kind of funny. I came into shamanism. I didn't know anything about shamanism other than I knew the word. I didn't know what shamanic practice was, what journeying, anything about that. And I was meditating one day, and this voice, I mean, I swear it sounded like the person was standing over me, booming male voice said, "You need to learn shamanism." And I was like, what? Right? Your helping spirits are like very often throwing you into the fire to get yourself back out. They do know best, though. And I have this model that I like to call or concept or principle. I don't know. I call it a slap in the face with a wet fish by the universe, and that is spirit, the universe, God, what have you, wants you to be on a specific path, wants you to do certain things, Sometimes, the spirit always wants you to find your true path, whatever that is, right? I'm not saying that's shamanism for everyone. We don't proselytize. I'm not out here saying shamanism is a path for everybody. In fact, I will say quite the opposite, that shamanism is not the path for everybody. You can learn to shamanic journey and then decide it's not for me, or you can learn about shamanism and go, that's not really calling to me, and that's totally fine. I'm not, I am not offended by that. Uh, um, but if it's your path, or whatever your path is, um, I like to say that the universe spirit is going to turn the volume knob up a little bit, and then turn the volume knob up a little bit, and then turn the volume, like, until it gets really, really loud. And if you're still ignoring it, spirit is going to slap you across the face with a wet fish. So that's what I call, it's like a root. You're gonna have a rude awakening. This is also known as, it's not the only thing that's known as the shamanic crisis. You might have, something horrible what you perceive at the time as horrible might happen in your life. For me, it was a health crisis. And one of the reasons I was meditating and exercising and eating, changing my diet and seeing doctors and doing all these things. I couldn't get past this stuff. And they're like, you need to learn shamanism. Okay. And found a teacher who I'm so happy took me in despite my complete lack of experience. And I had missed, like, she used to teach intro classes. She's retired from teaching now. But she used to teach intro classes, and I missed her very last intro class. She's like, well, you've missed my intro class. And I'm like, sorry. And emotional crisis. So it can be emotional crisis, psychological crisis, physical crisis. It can be a life crisis, right? Crises of spirit bring about shamanic awakening, which is not necessarily, in your case, they're just like, okay, you're a shaman, here you go. Guess what? You're journeying now, even if you didn't intend to do so. For me, it was I'm a little thick, and I had to like take me by the hand and guide me to the right place and find me the right teacher and time me, like, everything. When you're on your path, when you're on your true path, one of the things that happens is that everything lines up for you. Not to say that everything is going to be easy and simple, but the synchronicities that happened, the fact that I was like, I got to learn shamanism, and my teacher was about to start an apprenticeship, and she allowed me to join her apprenticeship. And she, I live in Maine in the US, which is, the woods. And my first impression when I heard the voice, you need to learn shamanism, was, how's that going to happen? Am I going to have to go to Peru or Siberia? I live in Maine. Is there even anybody who teaches shamanism around here? And I had moved to Maine a few years earlier. I grew up here, but then I moved away and lived in Boston for 20 years and then moved back here. And I had just moved a few years back and didn't know anybody in any spiritual community here. My spiritual work was always solo. So all of the things that lined up for this, and then there was, beyond my apprenticeship, then I learned that I wanted to practice, but I didn't want to practice before I learned how to do soul retrieval. And my teacher taught her very last class in soul retrieval at Kripalu in Western Massachusetts. I went there and learned soul retrieval with her. Then I did a 2-year initiatory training with her. And then I did 2 years of teacher training. And I was one of 8 people she accepted into her teacher training, and is never teaching that again. She's like, I'm not turning out, like, I'm not creating a teacher factory. I'm only teaching people I know and have invited in. And there were only 8 of us trained under my teacher to be teachers. So all of those things lined up for me. Like, the timing of them had to be perfect. Like, they had to be offered in succession. And oftentimes it was my teacher's last time teaching something that sort of thing. So yeah, when that happens, when you know that happens, you know you're you can rest assured that you're on your life path. I know I've gotten way off the original topic, and that's totally fine. I am happy to come on here. This is Shamanic Coffee Hour. I am having some coffee. Green Mountain Coffee Roasters, by the way, brand new mug. Isn't that a pretty color? I love that color. By the way, my the sunrise this morning was unbelievable. The sky was on fire, and so out where I live, when I look out, I see trees because I live in the woods. I see trees, and the trees to me at the time look black, and then above that was just fire, and it was gorgeous. And now it's snowing a little bit. First snow of the year. I don't think it's going to stick, but we have in the past gotten snow earlier than Halloween. It was never fun as a kid. Sometimes Halloween was nice, but sometimes it would be so cold. Your mother would make you put a big coat on over your Halloween costume to go trick or treating, and that was always the worst. We didn't, I don't want to put a coat on over my costume. But frequently we didn't really have a choice. And I remember one year taking my daughters trick or treating, and it had snowed. We had quite a bit of snow, and so they were literally in their costumes, under winter coats, in hats, snow boots, mittens, the whole thing. You could probably see, like this much of their costumes. They didn't really care. They were little, and they just really wanted the candy. But it's funny. It's funny. But one of the things about living up here that I do like is watching. I frequently sit here in front of me. In front of me is a picture, not a picture window, like a sliding glass door onto my porch with my backyard, which is just forest behind me. And I sit here and drink my coffee and watch the seasons change, or watch deer walking through my yard, or that sort of thing. So I do enjoy it. So I promise I've got to run soon, since I've been talking for an hour, and can't have my voice go out. But I do want to thank it, and I want to give people any opportunity to say anything or ask me any questions before I jump off. I'll stay on for about 10 more minutes, and if nobody has any questions, I'll jump off early. But I do want to say thank you for everybody who's joined me. I know this is like super early for some people, or some people may be in parts of the world where this is in the evening, but this is early for me. But it's hard for me to find this an hour, or if I talk over an hour and 15 minutes in the middle of the day, and then in the evening is really family time for me. So I don't like to take up time doing that. But okay, wild question, no problem. Let's do you think a shaman can be into BDSM lifestyle if done ethically, from a place where it's spawning a healthy growth for both parties? I know intense swerve of the car. No, it's not an intense swerve. And cellularly, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. And there should never, if things are done ethically, meaning there is consent among all parties, and like children can't consent and animals can't consent. If things are done ethically and there's consent among all parties, there should be absolutely no shame, no guilt, no anything associated with any kind of sexual activity. That's my take, right? I'm a very sex positive shamanic healer. I think so. Absolutely, 100%. A shaman can practice any form of sexuality, any form of kink, and it be of I have I have shamanic friends who are gay, who are straight, who are poly, who are every bit of the spectrum. And certainly there are cultures out there, there are shamanic cultures, particularly among Native Americans, but even other cultures where you have people who are non-binary gender, that are considered holy people. They're called, in many Native American cultures, they're called two spirits. They're thought of as having two spirits, one male, one female, in the same body. So uh, as far as BDSM goes, uh, I'm not an expert, but I have talked to people who practice that, and I've talked to therapists about it as well. And BDSM can be um, a very amazing healing practice, believe it or not. Some people use that to heal from sexual trauma. I'm not an expert in that, so I don't want to, say just, if you have sexual trauma, just go off and do this. Do it intelligently. Do it, do it safely. Learn how to do it properly. Make sure you're being taken care of emotionally. Absolutely, though, that can be, and I think it can be a part of shamanic practice. I think sexual expression, particularly, one of the things that I know about BDSM is that there's this people who are subs can go into what's called subspace, right? Which is an altered state. It's part of the reason why some people are attracted to it. That's ecstasis. It's ecstasy. It's standing outside of yourself. And I think that could potentially land really well into shamanic practice. And I think I think it's a topic that bears exploration, certainly. And I don't, like, again, I think the division between spiritual practice and the things that we do every day, including the sex that we have, is artificial, right? We are spirits. Everything, like, people say, "Oh, are you doing any sort of spiritual activity?" Yes, I'm drinking coffee. I'm taking one spirit into my body, the spirit of this coffee. This coffee comes from a living being. It is a spirit, right? And I am merging with that. So everything I do, sexuality can be a very powerful form of altering consciousness, clearly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen to your guides. Your guides, even if they're even if your guides come from a culture that had a lot of sexual repression, and who doesn't come from a culture that has lots of sexual repression, there's not going to be judgment. There's not going to be shame coming from your spirit guides. Your spirit guides may tell you that certain behavior, like if you're going into unethical behavior in any way, and it doesn't sound like that's the case here, that's one thing, right? That's, but I'll say this too, from a shamanic perspective. Many indigenous shamans actually experience sex and marriage, and even having children in the spirit world. That is considered a normal and critical part of shamanic practice. So they journey into the spirit world, meet a mate, have sex with them, and even have children who they raise in the spirit world. This is not just one culture that does this. This is multiple cultures do this. So, like, there is sexual activity in the outside of the physical as well. In ancient Greek paganism, there was the hieros. The hieros is the sacred marriage, the holy marriage. This isn't necessarily two people getting married. It could be but it was the idea of the divine masculine, the divine feminine in the persona of a god and a goddess becoming married. And there were rituals that reenacted that, which included assuming the role of a god and goddess and then having sex. And that is a sacrament in that belief system. So I don't think any, I will say this, I don't think any consent is critical. You cannot go without consent. Any consensual activity is non-spiritual, is whatever. Our attitudes about that are shaped by culture, by organized religion, all of these things. No, the only good sex is sex between a married man and woman, missionary position in the bedroom, and only for procreation. Other than that, forget it. Oh my gosh. You're welcome. I hope you can put your brains back together. Coffee helps for me anyway. But yeah, I don't think any consensual activity is in any way non-spiritual. I think the idea of sin, from Western religions has been applied to things, variably over the years, to say that, XYZ is a sin. Well, okay, but they didn't believe that 100 years ago, or they believed differently about that 100 years ago. I think it's funny that in Boston, where I lived for a while, Christmas was banned, was against the law to celebrate Christmas for, back in the Puritan days, for a number of years. And the reason why was people were having too much fun, right? And the Puritans, you have to remember, were Calvinists and believed that pleasure, anything that was entertaining, that you couldn't, like dancing and music, were bad. Anything that was sensual, anything that caused pleasure, although they did drink a lot of beer because the water was crap, but was sinful and took you away from God. So people were getting drunk and singing and brawling and doing whatever, and they're like, no, that's it. Christmas is banned. So they banned Christmas because it caused joy. And so, sexuality hopefully is something that can bring ecstasy. It can bring joy. It can be, it can be and is extremely healthy. That includes a full gamut of sexual activity. BDSM is certainly a part of that, and practiced by people who are, like I said, healing from sexual trauma. I should probably learn more about that. I don't. I just had a conversation recently with someone who's a therapist about that, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. And you describing it as taking back your power, I think that's wonderful. And very often you'll hear shamanic people talking about, I'm going to get my power. I'm going to take my power back. I'm doing, power, some sort of retrieval. The word sin is derived from the Greek. Yeah, missing the mark. That's exactly it. So, it is literally the word for an archer missing the target, right? So it has been used to mean I have offended God somehow. Like, imagine an omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent being that could be offended because you masturbate, or offended because you eat the wrong foods at the wrong time, or offended, right? That's not what it means. Like, the word in Greek anyway does not mean that. It means you've missed the mark. You're confused. You don't have the right information, However, I understand that people of different faiths and beliefs have different ideas about it, but I don't think, like, it's not like a black mark on your soul. I have done psychopomp work on a spirit who had murdered people, I mean, multiple people, and was sticking around because he was afraid to go to hell. And the psychopomp work like did not send him to hell. He was greeted by his loved ones in the afterlife. And I have not ever experienced a hell from the Christian perspective, although there's hell from the Norse perspective, which is where we get the word. That's very different. I've not experienced that in all of the work that I've ever done. And everyone who's ever said, can you go visit my loved one on the other side? Or can you, the spirit, can you help psychopomp the spirit? Or, whatever. I've never experienced that sort of fire and brimstone punishment after, afterlife kind of thing. For me, it is a method of control, right? And what more, like, controlling people's spirituality and their sexuality and their sex life, how much more power could we exert over a human being, right? It is absolute. If you don't have full control, full sovereignty over your body, what do you have? Your property at that point. So you should have full body autonomy, in my opinion, full body autonomy, full sovereignty over your body. That includes what you put in it, what you do with it, who you do, what you do with. All of those things, I think, should be, as long as you are a consenting adult, totally fine. As long as there's informed consent. Anyway, I have talked way over time. I have to run and get my day going, finish off I still have half a cup of coffee left. I've been talking a lot because I haven't been drinking my coffee, but I hope that you will, you're very welcome. I'm very happy to do so. I love coming on here and getting questions and conversation from people. I hope that you'll reach out to me. Thank you as well. Thank you for coming on. It makes my day to be able to talk to people, and in this method. But I will look into doing some journey circles, and maybe if you don't mind, get in touch with me through my website. You can send me an email or fill out a form on my website or whatever. And because for me, I would like to know like what people would be interested in journey, like from a journey circle perspective. How much I can charge for it, that would be reasonable for people. That sort of thing. I would want to make it reasonable, but also make it interesting for people. So, the more people you can get involved with it, the better. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you, everybody, for coming in per usual. Fantastic to see you all. I know I went off on lots of tangents, but hey, I'm a shamanic practitioner with ADHD, so that happens. And I will try to do these more frequently as more people come on and stuff. I know it's been a few weeks. I think the last ones I did like 3 of these in a row when I was traveling from my hotel room, but that was a few weeks ago. So I'll try to get back with it. I've got so much stuff to do. I haven't done a podcast in months, and don't mean to neglect people, but I love this format and I love conversing with people. So everybody have a fantastic day. We're coming on the weekend. So enjoy yourselves, and we'll